They said I was a ghost in that home, invisible, forgotten, harmless. But while they whispered about my confusion, I was memorizing every number they thought I'd lost. And the day they thought they locked me away for good, I was already haunting their accounts. They spoke about me like I wasn't in the room. Like the air itself had more weight than I did. My son told the nurse I wasn't all there anymore. My daughter-in-law smiled tightly, nodding along, whispering about my finances, my medications, my so-called decline. Their voices floated through the halls like cold drafts, slipping under doors, never realizing I heard every word. I sat quietly, hands folded, eyes steady, letting them believe I was slipping away. I didn't argue. I didn't protest. I let their plan unfold as they thought they were the ones in control. They signed papers, moved my accounts, sold my belongings, smiled while they emptied my life like drawers in an old dresser. They thought I was done, that I was harmless. But while they took control of my days, I took control of the nights, memorizing dates, recording numbers, writing details they thought I had forgotten. I listened to staff phone calls. I watched the facility's routines. I heard every whispered conversation made just outside my door. They didn't know that the mind they declared broken was sharper than ever. They thought they'd reduce me to a shell, a shadow of myself. But shadows move quietly, and mine had already reached into places they couldn't see. By the time they laughed over their final signatures, I had already secured what mattered. By the time they patted my shoulder and left me in that narrow bed, I had already set everything in motion. They thought they were burying me, but I was rising inside their banks, inside their deeds, inside every transaction they were too arrogant to double check. They called me a ghost, and now I was haunting every corner of their greed. I worked. I cooked. I listened. I waited. I gave. When they were little, my world was wrapped around their tiny hands. I can still see their chubby fingers gripping my skirt as they followed me around the kitchen. Their laughter echoed off the old walls, filling every room with a kind of joy that made the tiredness in my bones feel small. We didn't have much, but I made it enough. Hand-me-down clothes, patched at the elbows and knees. Dinner stretched with rice and beans. Birthday cakes made from scratch, not store-bought. They never went to bed hungry. They never went to school ashamed. Their father worked long hours at the plant. And when he passed, I became everything. Provider, protector, comforter. The roof needed repairs, but I sold my wedding ring instead. The one he gave me with shaking hands all those years ago. I held it for a long time before letting it go. But they needed tuition money, books, rent, food. I worked extra shifts at the bakery. My back ached. My feet swelled. I skipped doctor visits so their braces could be paid for. My own medications went unfilled so they could go on field trips. I worked. I cooked. I listened. I waited. I gave. I tucked them into bed every night, even when they were too old to ask for it. I whispered prayers into the dark, asking only that they be safe, that they grow into kind, strong people, that they always have enough. My dreams were simple. See them standing tall, see them happy, see them never needing to sacrifice the way I had. And for a while, I thought it worked. College graduations came, weddings, new jobs, new homes. I clapped the loudest, smiled the widest. My chest swelled with pride as I watched them build lives of their own. When the grandchildren came, I baked cookies just like I did for them. I sewed tiny clothes, wrapped little presents. I kept their favorite snacks in the pantry. I stayed up late waiting for their visits that became fewer, shorter. I told myself they were busy. They had families now. It was normal. But slowly I saw the warmth fade. The hugs became quick. The phone calls shorter. The texts delayed. The glances exchanged between my son and his wife when they thought I wasn't looking. The way they started speaking to me like I was fragile, like I was drifting away. I worked. I cooked. I listened. I waited. I gave. I never asked them for much. Only that they remember who held them through every storm. Only that, when my hands grew weak, they'd reach back and hold mine. But now, they speak about me like I'm a problem to solve, a weight to shift, a house to empty, an account to control. Their words have grown colder, smiles thinner, They pat my hand like I'm some fragile glass trinket they're afraid will shatter. They say things like, we're just concerned, Mom. We want to make sure you're okay. I know what they mean. I know what they're planning. I worked. I cooked. I listened. I waited. I gave. And now they wait. Wait for me to slip fully. Wait for my mind to stumble just enough to justify what they've already decided. But they don't know me as well as they think. I may have grown quieter, slower, older, but I am still here. Watching, listening, planning. The distance didn't come all at once. It crept in softly, like a slow leak in a tire you don't notice until you're stranded. The visits got shorter. They used to stay for hours, telling stories, eating my cooking, filling the house with noise and warmth. But then it was always a quick stop. Can't stay too long, Mom. Busy day, you know how it is. The kids have practice. The phone calls came less often too. Once every few days turned into once a week. Sometimes I would sit by the phone, staring at it, willing it to ring. I told myself they were busy. Of course they were busy. Work. Kids. Life. I told myself they loved me. I told myself they were just busy. But my reflection whispered otherwise. Then came the questions, slipped into casual conversation, like threads hidden in a warm blanket. Do you still remember your passwords, Mom? We should probably write those down just in case. Have you looked at your will lately? We want to make sure everything's in order so you don't have to worry about it. Are you taking all your meds? Sometimes it's easy to forget. They smiled when they asked. Voices light, gentle, but their eyes didn't match their voices. I laughed, played along, let them believe I didn't see what they were doing. I stirred my tea. I baked their favorite cookies. I handed over small pieces of information while keeping the rest locked tightly in my mind. And then there were the comments. Little things that stung more than they should have. You're still doing okay for your age. You're sharper than most people your age, Mom. You're lucky you're still able to handle so much. For my age. As if my years were a countdown clock winding itself down in front of them. One evening, my grandson, too young to know better, let something slip. Dad says you won't have to worry about the house for much longer. I smiled at him, my heart freezing beneath my skin. Oh, and why's that sweet boy? He shrugged. I don't know. He just says you'll be moving soon. I told myself it was nothing. Children mishear things, but I couldn't shake it. The next day, I found my daughter-in-law quietly scanning my file cabinet while I was in the kitchen. She said she was looking for old family photos. The albums were on the shelf. She knew that, but I smiled, pretending not to notice. I told myself they loved me. I told myself they were just busy, but my reflection whispered otherwise. At night, I began practicing my signature again. Slowly, carefully. Muscle memory, I told myself. My hand still steady. I didn't need to practice, but I did anyway, because something inside me stirred. They began offering to handle more and more. Let me take care of the bills, Mom. It's too much for you. Don't worry about your insurance. We've already talked to someone. We'll make sure everything's handled so you can just relax. Relax. As if peace required surrender. I cooked. I cleaned. I waited. I gave. And still, something gnawed at my edges. They started coming by when I wasn't expecting them. Checking the stove. Counting my medications. Asking if I'd misplaced things I knew were exactly where I left them. You're sure you're okay living here alone? We're just worried about you, Mom. I kept smiling. I kept nodding. But late at night, in the quiet, I felt the walls closing in. Not the house. Not my home. But the version of my life they were building around me. A fragile version. A fading version. A version they could control. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror one night, looking into my own eyes. The woman staring back at me wasn't lost. She wasn't confused. She wasn't slipping. She was watching. I told myself they loved me. I told myself they were just busy. But my reflection whispered otherwise. The suspicion grew heavier with every visit. Every softened tone. Every careful smile. I saw it now. Clear as day. But I let them believe I didn't. They called it an intervention. For your own safety, Mom, my son said, his voice soft, like he was delivering good news. They sat me down at the kitchen table, my own table, with paperwork neatly stacked between us. My daughter-in-law rested her hand on top of mine, patting it gently like I was already drifting away. "We've been talking, Mom. We're worried." My son began, stealing quick glances at his wife as though making sure they stayed on script. "It's too much for you to handle now. The house, the bills, everything." His wife smiled sweetly. "We only want what's best. Just some simple paperwork to help us help you. Power of attorney, a few authorizations, nothing complicated. This way you don't have to worry about a thing." The papers were thick, pages filled with words that looked official, complicated. My name printed in heavy black ink at the top. Legal jargon wrapped in soft words. They spoke to me like I was fragile, like I was tired, like I couldn't possibly understand. And I let them think that. I let them believe the woman who raised them was suddenly incapable of reading between the lines. I signed, slowly, carefully, my hand steady, my face still, my heart sinking deeper with every stroke of the pen. And just like that, they smiled, thanked me, and left my home with quiet relief, as if they had completed something long planned. The changes came fast after that. First, my belongings disappeared piece by piece. My jewelry box vanished under the guise of keeping it safe. My photo albums were stored away for protection. My husband's old records, the clock he fixed every winter, the chair where I read bedtime stories, all gone before I could even ask where. Movers arrived while I sat quietly on the porch, their boxes swallowing the life I had built one room at a time. My couch was still warm from where I sat for years as they carried it out. Next came the bank accounts. Frozen. Transferred. My access reduced to a monthly allowance, managed entirely by them. They called it streamlining. Then came the facility. They brought me here like it was a gift. A kind nurse with practiced kindness held my arm as we walked through the doors. "You'll love it here, Mrs. Harper. Everything is taken care of." The room was small. A single bed. A dresser too light to hold anything meaningful. Beige walls that never changed. Plastic flowers on the nightstand that never wilted. The world shrank around me, but my mind sharpened. I asked to make phone calls. They said my phone privileges were limited now. For your own good, I asked for visitors. They said my family had my best interests in mind and would visit when appropriate. I asked for my financial records. They smiled and said there was no need for me to worry. Everything was being handled. The staff spoke to me softly, like I was a child who might break if they raised their voices too high. They brought me my meals on schedule, my medication in little cups. My choices reduced to pudding flavors and bingo cards. And still they smiled. The betrayal wasn't loud. It was soft, polite, papered over with gentle voices and plastic reassurances. I lay in that narrow bed at night, the cold fluorescent light flickering above me, staring at the beige walls. The same walls every day. The same routine. The same emptiness. The plastic flowers never wilted. The beige walls never changed. My world shrank, but my mind sharpened. They thought I was gone. They thought I was fading. They thought they had won. But they forgot who I was. And I was not done. I wasn't screaming. I was counting. Every shift change. Every nurse who left files unattended. Every whispered conversation outside my door. I watched the rhythm of the facility, the gentle hum of its machine-like routine. The bingo games, the evening med rounds, the silent glide of food carts rolling down identical beige halls. They thought I was sitting there lost, floating, but I was watching. The staff spoke in soft voices when they thought I was asleep. "Her son says she's declining fast. She won't be here long." Such a shame, but the family's already handling her affairs. They spoke of me like I wasn't already memorizing every word. My world was small, but my reach was growing. One evening, during arts and crafts hour, their attempt at stimulation, I found a pen. Simple, plastic, left behind on the table. I slipped it into my sweater pocket while they fussed over glue sticks and paper flowers. Next came the paper. The back of the daily meal schedules worked just fine. I wrote tiny, neat notes late at night when the halls quieted. Dates, names, times, conversations. Each entry another stone in my foundation. They thought I was gone. I was gathering. I remembered something else too. Something they didn't know. Years ago, after my husband passed, I opened a small savings account in my name. A safety net I rarely touched. Tucked away, separate from our family accounts. The paperwork was still stored in my mind. Every number, every detail. I reached out to an old friend, Thomas, who still worked quietly at the same bank. We hadn't spoken in years, but when I explained, his voice lowered to a steady seriousness. It's still active, he confirmed, and untouched. That account became my lighthouse, a beam of control cutting through the fog they built around me. And then I remember my cousin, Miriam, a distant connection but a sharp legal mind. She had made a career of handling complicated estate matters. Quietly, efficiently. We hadn't spoken in decades, but family has a way of remembering blood when it matters. I wrote her name down. I wrote down everything. They thought ghosts only haunt the past. I was reaching into their future. The staff kept their routines. The facility director smiled at me kindly during our monthly check-ins. Your family is taking such good care of things for you, Mrs. Harper. I smiled back, small and polite. Yes, I whispered. They are. But every night, as the soft buzz of televisions hummed in the other rooms and the scent of bleach settled in the air, I sat by my lamp and wrote. I wrote about how my son had taken control of my finances without consent, how my daughter-in-law quietly sold my belongings while I watched from the porch, how they presented legal documents under false pretenses, smiling while stealing. They thought I was gone, but I was right here, sharpening, recording, preparing. There is a power in silence that loud voices never understand, a stillness that gathers strength while others grow careless. I wasn't screaming. I was counting, and soon, they would feel every number I recorded. I took my name back. Gloria arrived like a quiet storm. Calm, focused, the kind of woman who didn't need to raise her voice to command a room. She sat across from me in the visitor room, folding her hands gently, but her eyes were sharp. She listened to every word as I laid out what they had done. She read my notes, page by page, her mouth tightening slightly as the pieces came together. You've done more than most people could, she said softly. You documented everything. This isn't just suspicion, this is evidence. I nodded. They thought I was slipping. I was recording. The legal process moved quickly after that. Gloria filed petitions to challenge the guardianship. She subpoenaed the financial records they thought I would never see again. The forged signatures, the secret account transfers, the rapid selling of my belongings under the excuse of safety. They underestimated how dangerous silence can be. Medical evaluations were ordered, not by their doctors, but by the court. Independent, unbiased. The tests were simple. I answered every question without hesitation. Dates, names, sequences, puzzles. I recited everything with calm precision. The doctors made their notes, glanced at each other, and nodded. She is fully competent, they wrote, capable of managing her own affairs. Gloria built the case piece by piece. The secret savings account I had kept for years provided everything we needed to fund the legal battle. They thought I had nothing left. But that little account, my small quiet lifeboat, carried me through. Court orders were filed. My assets were frozen, not to keep me out, but to keep them out. Investigations were launched into my son's transactions, my daughter-in-law's property sales, the facility's cooperation. Every careful lie they had built was now being peeled back under bright, unforgiving lights. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to beg. The truth did the speaking for me. They tried to stall, to delay, to plead that it was all a misunderstanding. But the paperwork spoke louder than their excuses. The guardianship was revoked. My financial control returned. My property secured. My name fully restored to every document they once tried to erase me from. The final hearing ended quietly. No outbursts. No tears. Just a ruling. A judgment. A correction. Gloria patted my hand softly afterward. You're free, Mrs. Harper. 2 weeks later, I packed my small suitcase. The staff at the nursing home hovered nearby, unsure of how to treat me now. I nodded politely but said little. They had played their part. The director smiled nervously as she handed me my discharge papers. We wish you all the best, Mrs. Harper. I said nothing. The door slid open with a quiet hiss as I stepped outside. The sun felt warm on my face, the breeze gentle against my skin. I left through those locked doors holding nothing but a suitcase and a mountain of evidence. Elaine stood waiting by the car, her smile wide and proud. We drove away in silence, leaving the beige walls and plastic flowers shrinking behind us in the rearview mirror. The house was gone. Sold, yes, but the proceeds sat safely in my control now. I didn't need the house to feel whole. What I needed was this: my name, my power, my peace. They tried to reduce me to a signature, a form, a fragile shadow, but I stood tall again, carrying every quiet piece they thought they'd stolen. I took my name back, and with it everything else. I didn't fight. I vanished. Once everything was back in my hands, I moved swiftly, quietly. The house, the home they tried to strip from me, was sold on my terms. The proceeds placed into new accounts under new protections. Accounts they would never access. Accounts they would never even find. The lawyers handled everything. Gloria worked like a surgeon, clean cuts, no wasted motion. The funds moved into quiet trusts, protected, sealed. My estate rewritten entirely. Their names erased from every page. I left them nothing, not even a forwarding address. Then I made one final call. Just one. My son's voice, full of nervous relief, answered quickly. Mom. I didn't give him time to speak again. My voice was calm, cold. You called me a ghost. Now I'm invisible to you. And I hung up. That was the last time he ever heard my voice. The legal papers arrived at their door 2 days later. Thick envelopes delivered by certified mail. No warning, no explanation, just signatures required to acknowledge that everything they thought they had taken was gone. Reversed, locked beyond their reach. That's when the panic began. The calls flooded in. The voicemails stacked one after another. Please, Mom, we need to talk. We didn't mean for it to go this far. We were scared, that's all. You have to understand, we were only trying to help. I let them pile up. I never pressed play. Friends called too. They're trying to find you. They didn't mean it. Family makes mistakes. Mistakes. They called betrayal a mistake. They came to the house, knocking, pounding on the door of a home that no longer belonged to them. The porch light stayed dark. The windows remained closed. The silence answered for me. I sat in my new apartment across town, sipping tea while the wind whispered softly through my open window. My lilies bloomed in their vase, delicate and bright. The world outside moved on. The lawyers handled the rest, the fees, the settlements, the filings. Each document tightening the distance between us. I didn't block their numbers. I didn't need to. My silence was the only answer left. They thought they could take everything while smiling. Now they begged in the darkness, facing doors that would never open again. I didn't scream. I didn't argue. I disappeared. I was their ghost. But this time, not trapped in their story. I had written my own. The calls didn't stop. They multiplied. The messages filled my phone like fallen leaves, piling up, all saying the same thing in different ways. Mom, please. We didn't mean for it to happen like this. You're still our family. We were scared. We miss you. The gifts followed. Bouquets left at the doorstep of my old house, now someone else's home. Boxes of chocolates. Cards with handwritten apologies. Letters filled with carefully chosen words, as if they could patch the hole they tore open. Friends reached out too. Voices lowered with caution. Maybe it's time to talk, you know. They seemed so sorry. Family is complicated. You could meet them halfway. But I didn't move. I sat by my window, tea warm in my hand, the breeze carrying the distant hum of city life. My world was still, clean, free. I thought of all the years I had given. The decades of sacrifice stitched into every meal I cooked, every birthday I remembered, every late night fever I sat through. The nights I stayed awake worrying about their futures while mine quietly faded into the background. I worked. I cooked. I listened. I waited. I gave. And when my hands grew tired and my legs slowed, I expected only what I had poured into them. Care. Loyalty. Safety. Instead, they measured my worth by what they could take. By how much I no longer noticed. How easily they believed I would surrender. Now they were offering words. But words were cheap. Closure isn't an invitation. I closed that door. They were too late. Forgiveness was never about anger. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger burns hot and fast. What I had was colder, solid, quiet. The kind of peace that doesn't need explanation. The kind that requires distance. I didn't block their numbers. I didn't need to. The ringing phone was just background noise now. The knocks on the doors they used to own echoed into nothing. They had built those walls themselves. I sat with my books, my flowers, my tea. The small apartment was warm, filled only with what I chose to bring into it. Sometimes I caught myself remembering them as they once were, young, wide-eyed, clinging to my hand as we crossed busy streets. I mourned those versions of them long before the court dates, long before the betrayals. I wasn't lonely. I had simply learned to live without the weight of pretending. They reached. I was gone. Peace isn't something you negotiate with those who took advantage of your trust. It's something you protect. And I protected it fiercely. The messages slowed eventually. The flowers stopped arriving. Even the friends, unsure what else to say, faded into the quiet. And in that quiet, I exhaled fully. Closure isn't an invitation. I closed that door. They were too late. The cottage is small, modest, but it breathes with me. It holds no echoes of betrayal, no heavy shadows lingering in the corners. The windows open wide, welcoming the breeze, carrying the soft scent of earth and growing things. The garden was the first thing I planted. I knelt in the dirt, my hands steady, pushing roots into the soil. Lilies, daisies, a small row of lavender that hums softly when the wind passes through. Each bloom a quiet declaration. I am here. I am still growing. In the mornings, I cook for myself. Warm eggs, fresh bread, tea steeped just the way I like it. The table holds only one plate now, but it's enough. There's no need to cook for people who treated me like a burden. Now I cook for the woman who carried them all. I walk through the little rooms slowly. Not because I am weak, but because I can. There's no rush. No schedules taped to the wall. No pills in tiny cups handed over with soft, patronizing smiles. Just my pace, my rhythm. At night, I sit by the window with my tea and watch the moon rise over my flowers. The lilies glow pale in the moonlight, tall and unapologetic. Like me, sometimes I catch my own reflection in the glass. Not the woman they tried to shrink, but the one who endured. Who outweighted them? Who outsmarted them? I was never a ghost. I was the light. They wanted me silent, fragile, easy to move, easy to manage. But I was never theirs to control. Even when my world narrowed, even when their hands reached into places they never earned, I was still whole. Still watching. Still listening. There is a quiet kind of power in surviving what was meant to end you. I think of them less and less now. Not with anger. Not even with sadness. Just distance. They made their choices. And I made mine. Forgiveness was never the goal. Freedom was. And I have it now. The knocks on the door have stopped. The phone rarely rings. The silence they once gave me now belongs fully to me. It's not emptiness. It's space. Breathing room. Peace. I read poetry again. I hum while I cook. I plant seeds and watch them bloom. My laughter fills the tiny rooms when a bird lands clumsily on the feeder outside my kitchen window. No one hovers over my shoulder anymore, asking if I'm sure about my decisions. No one touches my papers. No one whispers about my confusion. I am not confused. I never was. They erased me once. This time I wrote my own name. And now I live fully alive.